Hello, community, and welcome back to another Keeping It Real with Dr. Nita podcast. I am your host, Dr. Nita Polite Wilson, C-suite trusted advisor, elite team strategist, and board director, preparing organizations to navigate culture, complexity, and change. We are back for, unfortunately, our last conversation with our Avish Parashar. He is a consultant, he is a trainer, he's an improvisational specialist, and we have been talking about how we can not get weighed down with the heavy topics that we're going to be faced with in 2025. Avish, welcome back to our last podcast. I'm sad about it, but I'm sure you're going to make me laugh all the way through, right?
Well, thank you, Dr. Nita. I'm sad as well. I've been having a great time chatting.
Well, in our last conversation, we talked about, again, the yes and I absolutely love that. I'm going to be mindful of using that more often. I really try to stay away from using the word but. And I like the yes and. So that's definitely something that I'm taking away, and I hope the community is taking away as well. In our last conversation, we went to the yes and the what if. And I think that's where creativity and play come into practice, especially at work. So tell us how we can do that in a way that's practical, that makes sense, but also doesn't constrain us. Because in our very first conversation, we talked about the importance of letting go, yet also taking ownership for what we want the future to be. So how can creativity and play foster into those two ideas?
Well, I think we need creativity and play for so many reasons. Number one, just when we talk about relationships and culture, creating a more positive workplace. You and I met at a conference for psychological safety, and I think that's such a huge piece of it is this mindset around if we think of play. Now, it's easy to think of play as just joking around and not taking things seriously, but if you watch kids play, like they take it real seriously,
They do.
right? There's guidelines, there's rules, but it's fun, and it's about lowering the psychological consequence. Let me say, because things in our lives have real consequences. We're talking about DE&I stuff. Like this is serious stuff with real consequences. But when we approach things with creativity and an attitude of play, we take the consequences a bit away from our thoughts, from our ideas, from our immediate work, which I think frees us up to be more innovative. And you had mentioned the idea about like asking yourself, like, what if I did this? And I think that is an element where we need to get more back into, because it's so easy to get fixated on the short-term goal and what I need to, the SMART goal we talked about, what do I need to achieve? We don't let our minds play. And as much as, kids play games, our minds play through the lens of what if. And there's two ways of doing this. One is just asking it, being your mind open to like, what if we did this? But you can also do this like physically on paper, journaling or brainstorming, list making. What if? Now, what separates this, what brings this out of the world of just pie in the sky daydreaming, is after you've done that, you let yourself be inspired to take one action. In improv, and if people listen to or watch the episode where you and I did the 2-word story, it was an improv game. That's the heart of improv. It's the only thing you control is your next step. So we all know people who are always having big ideas and daydreaming and never doing anything. So the daydreaming and the creativity is great, but then ask yourself, okay, what's the one little step I can take? Because that's the only thing you can do. A lot of people, they have that what if big dream and they say, you know what, I'm not going to do anything until I figure out every step from A to Z. And of course they do nothing. So dream, play, have fun, and then say, ooh, let me do one thing. And then that might get you the next idea, and then the next step, and the next idea, and the next step.
When we talk about consequences, for some reason, I'm reminded of the days when I was a government contractor supporting the Air Force out here in El Segundo, California. And from those experiences and from the things that I observed and from the stories that I heard and the amazing work that I was a part of, when I would work with leaders, I would remind them that when it comes to creativity and playing, thinking outside the box, the only time that you're ever going to have to think about dire consequences is, again, referring back to the days on base, if a payload worth of billions of dollars explodes in the air or there's loss of life. Anything beyond that, we can easily deal with. How do we take that mindset and kind of right size it within context so that we can more readily bring creativity and play into the work, even when the consequences are, to your point, we have a big, hairy, audacious sales goal that we have to make. How are we going to do that?
Sure. So again, context. If you're a leader, you lead by example.
Mm-hmm.
And that starts by yes-anding your people when they have ideas. Because so much of psychological safety is about the feeling of, am I going to be criticized? Am I going to be
Mm-hmm.
made fun of? Am I going to be hurt for voicing an opinion? So if we want to remove that consequence as a leader, it's how do we respond to the
Mm-hmm.
person? The other way is, if you want to be more overt about it, is to say, you talked about reframing before in an earlier conversation, reframe failure for your group. So
Yes.
instead of saying, all right, how are we going to solve this? No, say, all right, let's talk. What's the dumbest thing we can do right now? I want bad ideas only. And what that does is people start throwing ideas out and they're stupid. And you get laughing and positivity. Who come up with the worst idea? What's so interesting is the little nuggets is sometimes are within the bad ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Because then that triggers an idea like, oh, wait a minute. Like, yeah, that's a terrible idea. But there's this tiny little piece of that maybe we could do something with, right? So
Exactly.
it's reframing what failure is. And if your people are really reluctant, it's all right, don't come up with a good idea, come up with a bad idea, and let's just play and see where it goes.
I like that because you'd mentioned in an earlier conversation, sometimes the great idea is hiding behind the bad one. And I think that's important. And that's the importance of brainstorming. And when you do it correctly, you don't stop when someone comes up with something silly or stupid or impossible. That's
Mm-hmm.
why it's called brainstorming. You put everything on the table and then you evaluate and see what sticks. And that also increases the likelihood for creativity and play, actually resulting in something that's useful and beneficial and actionable, really.
Yeah, and I'll throw one more kind of technique people can use for group brainstorming is start with, even if you got a whole room of people, start with like 5 minutes of individual brainstorming. Give everyone a
Mm-hmm.
piece of paper and a pen and say, just brainstorm this kind of way. Don't let the pen stop moving. Get as many ideas out as possible. Because what happens is when you get a normal, quote unquote, normal brainstorming session, the introverts, the shyer people will hold back. One of the stronger voices, more experienced person, the alpha personality will start throwing out ideas, and those kind of sit back. Other people sit back, okay, that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're losing all this amazing creative genius of the introverts
Mm-hmm.
by having people start by writing, and then maybe everyone shares like one or two ideas from what they came up with. Now suddenly you're tapping into different personalities, different processes, and it just makes the whole brainstorming thing more effective.
I would love to know. I don't think I asked you this in our first conversation. How on earth did you land on improv? You said you've been doing it for 30 years and that you've never had a real job. Making people laugh and making it make sense, especially for heavy topics, that's work, my friend. So, how did you get into improv before I let you go?
Sure. And so it's not that I've never had a real job. I just haven't for like 20 years. I've had my own business. So I started the reverse. I started with improv. I did theater in high school. It took a lot of time. And so when I went to college to get an engineering degree, I was like, I can't do theater. But a friend was like, hey, you should do improv because, I was being funny. And just real quick note, what do you think the first thing I said to him was when he said, oh, you'd be good at improv comedy?
Yeah, but
I said, yeah, but I've only ever done scripted. I've never done improv. He had to nag me for like months just to finally go see a show. And the moment I saw it, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. They had auditions the next week. I got in. And by the time senior year came around, people were telling me, you're good at this. You're going to keep performing after college. And so I decided to.
So after your first audition, you got in?
It was a college group. So it was just a college group. Yeah, they're big like spring.
Even still, your first try, you got in. That's a big deal.
I got in. It was great. And again, this is creativity and fun and play. I had no aspirations of being a performer. It just looked like so much fun. So I went and I had fun and they accepted me. And that was freshman year. And then by senior year, I decided, all right. So I started my own group with the dream of turning it into like the second city of Philadelphia, right? My own theater. And
right.
So because I wanted that, this is when I started learning about goal setting and leadership and marketing and business and motivation. And I started to see the connections. Mm-hmm. So I remember one of the first connections I made was I read 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey.
Yes.
And I read his 7 Habits and I'm like, oh, I could apply this to be better at improv. Mm-hmm. So his first 3 habits are independence. And I'm like, oh, so as an improviser, before we start worrying about how well we connect with each other, I need to get everyone to have their own creative strengths in. And then the next 3 were interdependence. I'm like, so I literally would come into a rehearsal, a workshop I was teaching, and talk about seven heads. And over time, I realized, oh, if I can use business books to be better at improv, I can then use improv to be better at business. And so when it was time for me to accept the fact that, all right, this group, we were successful, we're doing shows all around the city, but we were never going to be what I, that visionary goal I had, and I needed to move on to something else. I was like, well, I'd been following speakers and learning about it, and that persistent yes but was, oh, you should be a speaker someday. I was like, all right, well, I'm not sure what else to do now, so that was 20 years ago when I launched my speaking business using improv to teach, and here I am, still doing it.
Well, congratulations. I have enjoyed having you on the show. Community, just as a recap, we're talking about, again, how do we deal with heavy topics in 2025 without getting weighed down? In our first conversation, we talked about starting the year with yes and, so that we can let go of control, yet still have ownership for making the world a better place as it is dependent upon us. The decision to cry or laugh and coping through with laughter as appropriate, of course. Smart goals versus non-smart goals, and the importance of being visionary and sometimes looking for things that are not attainable because that just might get in our way, but to broaden the aperture of what's possible. And then finally, the importance of creativity and play. Avish, it's been delightful having you. And community, he also left us with the tip. We must read the book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Get your year started off well. Clearly, I keep it on my desk for a reason. Wow. Avish, this has been amazing. How can prospective clients get a hold of you to have you come and work with their teams?
Sure. So best place is my website, avishparashar.com. It's my name. If you can't do that, just Google Avish, A-V-I-S-H. There's not that many of us in the world. I'll be one of the first few results. But yeah, I've got video clips, information. I did a TEDx talk. That's up on my website. So you can learn all about me, and all my contact info is there. So shoot me an email or give me a call from there, and I'd love to chat and see how I can help.
Fantastic. Thank you for helping me kick off 2025 with my community. Again, community, we are a learning community. Whatever you shared, whatever you liked, please share it with your network on LinkedIn or wherever you hang out with your own comments. I don't have all the answers, and it's not my job to, so I want to hear what you have to say. In the meantime, though, please stay in the flow with me. Follow, like, and overshare any of my podcasts to help you to reframe hot topic conversations from difficult to different. Until next time, this is Dr. Nita reminding you to stay blessed and keep it real.